Smells like football, man. We've got some crispy fall mornings here in Nashville, Tennessee. We've got playoff brackets in our hands. What much more can you ask for as we march on into the month of November? Welcome into the Spring Blake College Football Show. Today is Wednesday, November 5th. This is a hybrid episode. It's the 5th, but it's also November 6th. If you're listening here and the date is still November 5th, then you are listening to the college football playoff reaction portion of this show, which is released exclusively on its own on the YouTube channel. It will also be the first thing we discuss on November 6th episode, which will be available on YouTube as well, but your Spotify's and your Apples, wherever you get your podcasts. If that doesn't make sense, then don't pay attention to anything I just said. But if you're here and the date is November 5th, we're just going to spend a nice 10, 15 minutes talking college football playoffs. The committee released its rankings on Tuesday night. So we'll go into all of the happenings from that, any major points of contention, what stood out, how we think this thing is going to snowball moving forward. And then if you are listening to this on November 6th or the 7th, hopefully not the 8th, because that means that you're trying to get this in right before kickoff, we're going to have the rest of this episode, and that is going to include game previews for the three biggest games of the week. We are going to have the Week 11 Spring Blake Sweet 16. We will also have best bets of the week, so all of that stuff will be available. But again, if you're sitting here and it's the one day November 5th, or you're finding this exclusive video on YouTube, we are just here to talk college football playoffs. Before we do that, because this is going to be looped in with a bigger part of this episode, please make sure to support this show however you can. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you guys want to do whatever you did to Monday's episode again and again and again, and just make that what this show is moving forward, like, sign me up for that. I think last time I checked, we were like 400 views. I don't know if some bots in a different country found it or if this is actual football fans paying attention, but whatever you guys did on Wednesday, big fan of that. Monday, big fan of that. So again, if you're one of those viewers, like the video, subscribe to the channel, do all that important stuff that helps support this show. If you're listening, Spotify, Apple, make sure to leave a 5-star review, subscribe to the channels there. Follow the socials, that being Twitter and TikTok at Spring Blake CFB. All right, so college football playoff conversation. The committee came out with its rankings Tuesday evening, and I got to hand it to him. You know, Greg McElroy said it live on the broadcast if you were watching it unfold there. I really like what the committee did. Now, is some of that to do with the fact that we nailed our predictions on Monday's show? We got all 12 teams correctly, which I don't think is the hardest thing to do. But not only that, we got 8 of the 12 seeds correct. The only things that we mixed up were Texas A&M and Indiana. We had them flipped 2 and 3. And then we also had Oregon and Texas Tech flipped 8 and 9. So we were pretty in line with what the committee put out, what I thought they were going to put out. And even the first 4 out, we hit Texas and Oklahoma as the first 2. We also had Louisville on our list. The one difference was they had Utah in, a very interesting conversation, which we'll delve into, as opposed to us having Georgia Tech in there. So in a broad sense, I really like the start, I guess, of this process this year. Last year, I had a lot of qualms with people, in the committee weighing early season losses, not evaluating what teams have developed into, because that's what being a team is all about. It's growing and learning from your lumps along the way. And who are you now versus who were you in weeks 1 and 2 and maybe even week 0? Like there were a lot of things that I did not like about the playoff committee last year. If this is what it's going to look like, and again, this is just week 1, they have the right to change and do different things between here and the end of conference championship weekend. But if this is the criteria they are going to use, they have my full support. I think the 2 biggest things that they said going into this process they were going to evaluate or take into consideration more is schedule strength, and then this new record strength, which is a new criteria or a new stat that they've put in. I don't know if I fully understand it, but it's almost like we're not going to punish you for tough losses, but we're not also going to reward you for easy wins. So I think they're trying to say like, hey, please schedule tough games. And if you want to, schedule them early in the season, because that's when you have the chance to. Like, make your non-conference tough games, because if you lose close, if you're Texas, like, yeah, you already have 2 losses, but one of those was week 1 to Ohio State. So we're still going to put you at where they had them. I guess one of the first 4 teams out, technically, I think it was 10th in the poll, but ACC and G5 jumped them. So they're not going to punish Texas for that. They're not going to punish Notre Dame, as we saw, for losing in week 1 and week 2 to Texas A&M and Miami by a combined 4 points, because since then, they've only gotten a lot better. And you would assume that if you put those teams on a field, it might be a little bit different of a story. So let's stay on Miami versus Notre Dame. I think that's the hottest topic of this first release. It's like, okay, well, yeah, Miami beat Notre Dame. They have the same amount of losses. I do believe it is important what you turn into as a team. Teamwork, camaraderie is all about the developments you make, the lessons you learn, and who you are in August is not your finished product. We're starting to see the finished products now. We're starting to see what these teams have turned into. All Miami has done is turn into a team that is not getting what it needs out of its passing game. Their defense in the secondary is struggling against top wide receivers. When good offenses want to go up against them later in the year, they're starting to slowly fall apart. I think you do deserve to be knocked down a peg because you are not entering the playoffs at your best. That's the thing. The college football playoffs don't start in October. So what you do in September, like, I get it should matter to some extent. But who you are in the months and the weeks leading up to the playoffs should weigh a little bit more. And that's what I think you see here. Now, having Miami all the way down to what was 18th, I believe, like, yeah, it's low. It's shockingly low. It's below Virginia. It's below Georgia Tech. It's below Louisville. Like, they are down a lot of rungs in their own conference. And a lot of that plays into the fact that they don't have a clean path to an ACC title game, which might mean they don't even get an at-large. We'll talk about the ACC overall in just a second. Notre Dame, and maybe I'm just saying this because it validates my beliefs, but when you watch Notre Dame on a football field, the last 6-7 weeks, they're one of the best teams in college football. I have had them power rated as a top 5 football team for months now. Yeah, they lost by 3 to Miami on the road in week 1 in a game in which was their freshman quarterback's first college game. And then they get a quick bye week after that. They get a home game in week 3, and they lose by 1 point to Texas A&M, who is a top 3 seed. And that 1 point was because of an missed extra point. They also missed a penalty on the game-winning touchdown for Texas A&M. Like, I just like to see that the committee is not just taking a look at wins and losses and wins versus certain teams, and they're just putting context into it, because football is not black and white. There's a whole lot of gray in this stuff. And that gray area is telling you right now that Notre Dame is playing better football than Miami. So it'll be a hot topic. I don't think it should be. I'm very happy with the way that this went. In my opinion, Miami is still more talented than Georgia Tech. They are still more talented than a Virginia. They're probably still, to me, like in my power rating system, Miami is the highest power rated team in the conference. But unfortunately, because they've decided to slip up to Louisville and SMU, they're knocked down a few pegs. I mean, you didn't see SMU in these rankings at all, did you? That's a bad loss for Miami, and it's really bad timing for it too. So let's talk about some other things there, because Miami Notre Dame is definitely the biggest one. I would have thought they would have put an SEC team in the top 2, that being Texas A&M, just to like even things out a little bit. Be like, all right, well, we've got an undefeated team in the 2 power conferences. No offense to the ACC and Big 12, but like, let's just put them 1 and 2. Having A&M at 3, I don't really have that many gripes over. I think Indiana's a better football team than them. Texas A&M still scares the shit out of me on a weekly basis. I think we'll have time to talk about the Missouri game later on in the full episode that we'll release tomorrow, but I'm fine with them putting Ohio State and Indiana in the top 2, because I believe they have the best wins of the season. Like the way that Ohio State beat Texas in week 1, the way they beat up on Washington, who is the other opponent that they have ranked inside the top 25. Like, those are impressive enough. They're undefeated, defending champs, put them at 1. Indiana, massive win over Oregon. Really, they've only played a team close, and that was Iowa, who's ranked in the top 20. So I cut them some slack there. I have no gripes with A&M being 3 because their biggest quality win is a 1-point win at Notre Dame early in the season. LSU, but LSU, they fired their head coach after that, so I'm fine with the way that shook out. I did feel like 9 is a pretty fair assessment for Oregon. By the way, I should mention this. I hope that I had enough time before putting this video out. On the right side here, I'm going to put what I thought they'd do. On the left side here, I'm going to put what they actually did, so that way you guys have some stuff to just look at and read through, and it's not just my face, and we have to go back and tie in all these numbers. Now, if you're listening on the podcast, sorry. More reason to go over to the YouTube. None of that makes sense to you, but either way, I want to talk about Oregon being ranked number 9. It's a fair assessment. When you take a look at what Oregon has done this season, they lose a home game to Indiana. Okay, Indiana is one of the 2 best teams in college football, so you don't lose too much from that. You have some really high-powered wins, but they're against lesser opponents. And then you have some games that you're like, what happened there? Okay, you go to Wisconsin, terrible weather conditions, quarterback gets banged up. 21-7 against Wisconsin. It's like, okay, was that the most impressive win I've ever seen? So they haven't done anything yet on their schedule to warrant being above 9. That being said, they're still in a really great position to keep climbing because on the rest of their schedule, they have 3 ranked games by the playoff committee still to go, that being against USC, Washington. They've got Iowa this weekend. Oregon is in a position where they could still climb into that same range that Georgia, Ole Miss, BYU are in right now, that 5, 6, 7. Like, if they get 3 more ranked wins, all that does is keep bumping them up the charts. On the flip side, being at 9 right now and not having solidified yourself like a Georgia or an Ole Miss as in that top tier, you can play a really tricky game here. If you slip up one of those times, definitely 2 more losses bumps you out of there. But it'll be really interesting to see how they handle the rest of their schedule because those are 3 tough teams, 3 teams that know they're ranked in the top 25. They know that a win over Oregon only pushes them closer to an at-large bid in the playoffs. So they're in a spot they're the most volatile team in the playoffs right now, in my opinion, because you could make the argument that they run through and steamroll these teams and all of a sudden you're like, Oregon's 5th. They gave Oregon a top 5 seed. Or they slip up one more time and you can start to make the case, okay, well, USC has a win over them and they ran the table and they've got the same record. And that would mean that USC also beat Iowa. Or Iowa could do the same thing where Iowa runs the table. They beat Oregon. They beat USC. And it's like, okay, well, now Oregon's not that clean of a fit. Like there's a really interesting chance here. I did spend some time, too much time, trying to figure out if the Big Ten could sort of cannibalize itself out of a 3rd team. I think one of those are still locked. The way the schedules play out, they all play each other close enough to where, like, if Oregon runs the table, they're obviously in because we have already seen they're in. If Washington runs the table, they're 10-2. One of those losses is to Ohio State. The other one's to Michigan. Like, that's not enough to bump them out if they're 10-2. Iowa, they run the table. A couple of early season losses. They're the team that's played Indiana the closest. Like, you'd put Iowa in. USC runs the table. They have a win over Michigan. That means they have a win over Iowa and Oregon. Some games, sure, they haven't looked too great, but the way it plays out, to me, I would be shocked if there wasn't a 3rd Big Ten team in there. It will be interesting to see if a 4th could get in. Could Michigan do the unthinkable? I'm pretty low on Michigan. I'm kind of right in the same line. I guess I would say that the committee is at 21, but Michigan's in that spot too, where it's like, if they run the table, if they do it again, I mean, they've beaten Ohio State for a few years in a row now. If they can do it a 4th time, I believe, 4th or 5th at this point, 10-2, only team to beat Ohio State, you're putting them in. So I think a 3rd team from the Big Ten is certainly in. It will be very interesting to see if there's a compelling enough of a case for a 4th one to be in, which leads me to the other conversation, the race between a 5th SEC team And a second Big 12 team is going to be very interesting. Right now, there are two teams from the Big 12 in, that being BYU and Texas Tech. Utah at 13. Really interesting case study because they're just on the outside. I've looked at their schedules. I wish I put them out. None of them are like that daunting. Again, in the Big 12, anything can happen. But Texas Tech and BYU play each other this weekend. I think what you need out of the Big 12 is someone other than Texas Tech to win the conference title. Because I think Texas Tech has a strong enough resume and enough talent. Like if we're using context and we're using our eyeballs more than just statistics this year from the committee, which is what we've seen thus far, Texas Tech, even if they're the runner-up in the Big 12, they are still worthy of being one of those at-large teams a la Ole Miss, a la Oregon. Like they'll be one of those similar teams where it's just like, okay, yeah, the schedule, they didn't win the conference title, but they're still one of the best teams we've seen in college football from start to finish. So I think for the Big 12 to get a second team in, you need a BYU or you need a Utah to win the conference title, which will be really interesting to see how it shakes out because in the SEC, you are going to have teams that don't get the chance to play for the conference title, teams that might have a third loss on the season, but resumes and talent profiles that probably stack up better than Utah and BYU. You can go to the bank and bet whatever you want. I would take Texas, I would take Oklahoma over the likes of BYU and Utah right now. I personally have always felt like BYU is going to slowly flame out. That's just been my opinion on them since I've started talking college football. I guess I've just refused to believe them. They could prove me wrong. They could go in and either lose close to Texas Tech, hell, even beat them, and I'll be like, hey, I'll eat my crow for a 20th week in a row. But I think that's going to happen. And if Texas Tech wins the Big 12 title and BYU has a loss or maybe a second loss after the conference title game, seeing that Texas and Oklahoma are the first two teams out right now and knowing the schedules they have to go on and the chance that they have to boost their resume even more, I've said from the start, I think a 3-loss SEC team, whether it be Texas or Oklahoma, will get into the playoff, and it might come at the expense of a 1 or 2-loss BYU or a 2-loss Utah. So very interesting case study there. Again, I always hope that these things sort of play out. Last year they did. Hopefully this year they do as well. But that's one thing that I think stood out to me the most is that race in, between those second-tier at-large SEC teams versus a second team from the Big 12. You know where we won't be having that argument is in the ACC. I am very happy that the committee handled the ACC in the way that they did, and that was Virginia, who is technically the 11 seed. I think they were rated like 14th, but then you had Georgia Tech, Miami, Louisville was one of the first teams out. Like, to me, their reflection of the ACC is just whoever the champ is, they'll get the 10 or 11 seed. Like, they're not going to go higher than that. This conference is not what the other three are. It's certainly not the Big 10 and the SEC. The Big 12 has better teams at the top and honestly better teams in the middle and the bottom, but that's neither here nor there. I just was very happy to see the committee come out the gate and be like, we're not going to do a Clemson SMU scenario from last year where, oh, well, this team made the conference title. They have 1 or 2 losses on the year. Sure, put them in. No, there's no team in the ACC that should be an at-large. The only one I'd argue is Miami, but at this point, they've kind of ruined their case with some really bad losses down the stretch. So that's almost 20 minutes here. That's really all I wanted to do. I wanted to think, I was like, should I put out what my playoff seedings would be? But then I think that'd be way too confusing to have what my predictions were, what I would currently do, what the playoff committee did, and what I thought the playoff committee would do. Like, that's too many. So we're just going to spend a little bit of time each Wednesday, YouTube exclusive, putting out my thoughts on the college football playoffs. This will be the intro to the Thursday show. So for Wednesday, I'm going to sign us off here. Thank you guys for supporting. Again, like the social, follow the socials, like the videos, subscribe to the channels. I'll do the I love you, I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. And then if you are listening here on Thursday or Friday or Saturday, we're going to take a water break, and I'll be back recording the rest of this show at a later time. Peace.